Welcome to the 5th episode of In a Nutshell, a webinar by Natural Gas World, where we analyse the trends underway in the global gas industry. My name is Joseph Murphy. This week, we are discussing the EU's new hydrogen strategy unveiled by the European Commission in early July. This strategy argues that Europe is well positioned to gain from the development of hydrogen energy, both in terms of cutting emissions and advancing its manufacturing capability. The strategy calls for the production of up to 10 million tonnes per year of green hydrogen by 2030. That is hydrogen produced from water using renewable energy. But it also accepts that some abated fossil fuel derived hydrogen will also be needed to deliver on emissions cuts in the shorter term. So here with me to discuss this important topic is Jean-Arnold Vinois, an advisor on European energy policy at the Jacques Delors Institute in Paris. He is also an honorary director of the European Commission, having retired from the Commission in 2013. Hello, Jean-Arnold.
Hello. Hello, Joseph.
Hi. Also with me is Tudor Constantinescu, Principal Advisor to the Director General for Energy at the European Commission since March 2011. Hello, Tudor.
Hello. Thank you for the invitation.
So, it's great to have you here. So may I start by asking you, Tudor, just to run through some of the key points of the strategy, elaborating on my very brief summary of it, and then maybe Jean-Arnold, you'd like to respond with some questions.
Yep, that's okay. So let's hear Tudor maybe on the what he may say about the strategy and how he sees it as a key policy to be launched by the European Commission in the future.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you, Jamina. Thank you for the invitation again. We have launched the strategy on hydrogen on the 8th of July, at the same time with energy system integration strategy. And this is not an accident. In fact, you know, we started since a while to look at the opportunities we have in the energy system for better efficiency and for achieving the objective of carbon neutral economy as underlined by the President von der Leyen for 2050, but in the most cost-effective way and making best use of the resources, putting energy efficiency first principle into work, and really making sure that we embark on this journey in the most cost-effective way. And in this context, it appears that indeed hydrogen has a major role to play, and has a major role to play because the future for the energy system to become decarbonized by 2050 is clear that we'll have to have renewables into the center stage. So renewables will have to be into the center stage, but for this we'll have to also integrate renewables in the most cost-effective way. Now, if we look at the final energy consumption, I would say you'll see that electricity represents only 23%, but we estimate that by 2050, electricity will represent about 50%. And there are two elements I would like to underline in this context. First of all, that currently, renewables, the highest penetration as share is in electricity, and we estimate that by 2030 we'll have 55% the share of electricity coming from renewables, and by 2050 over 80%, also in the long-term decarbonization strategy. But on the other hand, as I said, now electricity is only 23%. 1/3 is in the final consumption is represented by transport, and about 45% is represented by heating and cooling. Once we move towards 2050, the share of electricity is increasing, while at the same time the share of renewables in electricity is also increasing. So this is how are we going to make use of these big renewable capacities to decarbonize the other sectors, being transport or being carbon intensive industries and heating and cooling. And here is the other element. So this is one side of the story. The other side is that by 2050, we'll still have 40–50% of our final consumption not in the form of electrons, not in the form of electricity. It means that this other form, which are molecules and can be gas or can be liquid fuels, will also have to be decarbonized. So this is where hydrogen plays such an important role, because of course you'll have biomethane and so, but it not be sufficient for these amounts of energy carriers we need. So hydrogen will be a key enabler, for one hand, ensuring that also the molecules are decarbonized, and on the other hand, to ensure that the capturing the whole value of renewable electricity and decarbonizing other carbon-intensive industries and transport. So these are the underlying elements which are at the basis of the hydrogen strategy and the link with the energy system integration. And then, of course, looking at strategy, we had to start to look at why and how much we have, what we need to invest to achieve that, what forms of hydrogen we need to scale up, what are the applications in which we are going to use hydrogen mostly, because there are also other alternatives, of course, and we don't want to take any biased approach in this process. So we also had to look at how to stimulate further research and innovation, but also how to make, in the end, the markets work and how to integrate hydrogen into the energy market. Now, hydrogen is only 2% of the energy mix, and to be frank, this 2% is mostly used as feedstock. It's even less than 1% that is really for energy purposes being used. So to move from here to another scale, of course, we need to invest and to work a lot. Another aspect related to this is the fact that of the hydrogen which we have now, 94-95% is fossil fuel based, without any form of carbon capture and storage or carbon capture, pyrolysis also, so it's just fossil fuel based. So if we want to decarbonize and to reach a carbon neutral economy, it's clear that we have to change this. So research is important, evaluation is important, as I said, but then also is to put in place a regulatory framework and the markets which will enable this transformation over the years. And in the end, to make sure that Europe is not alone in this journey, and I can assure it's not alone, and we have paid due attention to the international aspects because there is a strong movement globally, and we have tried to underline the main elements which are of interest, of course, first of all to Europe, but also to secure that globally we make use of hydrogen. And this is a discussion which since a couple of years picked up very much also in the G20 process with the IEA, but also in other international forums.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tudor, for this very good summary of the EU hydrogen strategy. I have a very simple question to you. Why is it coming now, and why has it not been developed before? Because we are speaking about hydrogen for decades, a bit like the nuclear fusion, you know. And why do you think it's coming now? Is it because the pressure from other places like China or US or I don't know? Or is it because the renewable have reached a certain level of maturity which is making clean hydrogen possible? So what is your view on this?
Let's say that, okay, there is I think still quite a difference because we produce, is true, you are absolutely right, hydrogen since a number of years, and electrolysis, for example, is well known, also other production pathways, so it's not like fusion where we still need to invest a lot also on the research side and to make this happen by mid of the century, becoming a reality in the energy mix. With hydrogen is different, and it's different even if we know that since some number of years. But first of all, we made important progress in terms of research and development. And we used all the vehicles, including at European level, like the fuel cells and hydrogen joint undertaking, to start 10 years ago with electrolyzers at a capacity of only 10 kilowatts, and to have now the biggest one in operation, which was also visited by our Commissioner, Carly Simpson, on the occasion of the launch of the strategy in Köln, in the refinery of Shell, of 10 megawatts. So from 10 kilowatts to 10 megawatts in 1 year. And there is another one of 20 megawatts is under construction. And furthermore, under the new Green Deal call for research and innovation this year, we will have 100 megawatt electrolyzers to be built. So you see, it's moving into the scale of what we need into the energy system. And this was enabled, of course, by the technological progress, as I mentioned, but also by the upscaling of renewables. So renewables are very much at the center stage of this, because renewable electricity in particular, but in general also other sources of renewables, and the fact that the cost of renewables decreased very much and will continue to decrease. If you look at the cost of hydrogen coming from electrolysis, about 60% is represented by the cost of electricity. So more than the cost of the electrolysis itself. So it's clear that more we'll have renewables and lower the cost of renewables, more competitive the hydrogen produced from electrolysis from renewables will be. So there is a really very strong link between the two. As I said, the cost of electrolyzers, for example, has to decrease. So the capacities, the dependence, and the use of raw materials, of critical raw materials, will have also to decrease, and the efficiency still needs and can be improved. But these things are developing at the same time. And looking at the future energy system, as I mentioned before, that we expect by 2030 to have 50-55% of the electricity we produce coming from renewables, mainly variable power, and by 2050 over 80%. It's clear we'll need for the energy system to look more and more at storage capacities. And when we say storage, of course, first of all, we have now the pump hydro, but the capacity to develop additional pump hydro is limited. And the biggest increase in the scenarios we analyze for 2050 for energy storage are batteries and chemical storage, that is hydrogen. And if we speak about storing gigawatt hours for days and weeks, hydrogen is becoming clearly much more competitive, as it was pointed also in the IEA report for the G20 just almost two years ago. So it's in this context that we started to look more on hydrogen as a solution to support decarbonization of the entire energy system and to support also the decarbonization of processes which otherwise are difficult to decarbonize, in particular in carbon-intensive industries like chemical, petrochemical, fertilizers, ammonia, and so on, plus the heavy-duty transports. And here we should also think of maritime. We should also think of railway system, which 46% in Europe are still diesel, and we need solutions to decarbonize not only through electrification directly.
Yeah, that's very clear. You have spoken about the advance made in renewables, but clearly in the hydrogen strategy proposed by the Commission, we see blue hydrogen as an important, at least intermediate steps before we may produce hydrogen only from renewable. So how do you see this blue hydrogen prospects, especially that it is requiring carbon capture and storage, which is today a technology which is not completely commercially viable, and which is also attracting some problems of public acceptance?
Yeah, it is true that there are problems with public acceptance with CCS, and we have noted this in time. We also have noted that it was not maybe enough attractive to make investors come invest in CCS projects. The Commission had already taken in the past some steps on this, but without being followed concretely enough by the industry. Now, in what relates to hydrogen, indeed, we promote and we have developed a vision in the strategy, which you saw that there is a stage approach till 2024, till 2030, and till 2050. And we have concrete objectives in terms of electrolyzer capacities to be installed by 2024, 6 gigawatts, 40 gigawatts by 2030. But we know that we'll need much more also for the future, but also in this transition period, we'll now need other forms of low carbon hydrogen. And you can call it blue. We avoided to use colors, but we defined it as low carbon hydrogen. And we furthermore make clear references to the fact that we'll need a system of guarantees of origin and certifications for both renewable and low carbon hydrogen, We also refer to the fact that we need to encourage the use of both in the coming period, while, of course, renewable, it's for the long term the most attractive and also the solution which will really bring us to the carbon neutrality in 2050. But of course, still 2050, there is still work to be done, and we need to invest in the different forms of hydrogen, bearing in mind, as I said before, that currently 96% of the hydrogen we have is just fossil fuel based, without any CCS or without any other process which to make it low carbon. So therefore, this would represent already an important step forward, and we look to promote it into this direction. And there are a number of mechanisms we have pointed out in the strategy, starting of course with the ETS, but not only. As I mentioned before, we'll need these guarantees of origin. We'll need also common law carbon threshold for the promotion of hydrogen production installation based on the entire life cycle greenhouse gas performance, and therefore we'll put in place a certification of renewable and low carbon hydrogen. We'll also revise the ETS and think of support schemes compliant with the competition rules, of course, like carbon contracts for difference, to exactly acknowledge this, but also to enable carbon-intensive industries, in particular like steel, to start to decarbonize. Steel and ammonia are really very, very important. So in this context, we'll need not only renewable hydrogen in the beginning and for the coming years, but also other forms of low carbon hydrogen. And there is another thing I would like to add here. We speak about this, which are the most close to commercial or forms of hydrogen, but this doesn't mean that we are not going to continue to invest, in particular in research for developing other production pathways, again, on renewables, or can be also from fossil fuels like pyrolysis, and so to encourage development of other pathways for renewable and low carbon hydrogen production.
So thank you, Tudor. You spoke about the need, of course, to have good projects to invest in. And in this respect, there is, of course, an industrial strategy which has been made public in March, and which is linked to the hydrogen strategy, especially for decarbonization of energy-intensive industries. And then the Clean Hydrogen Alliance has been created. Could you tell us about what the Commission expects from the Clean Hydrogen Alliance, particularly in terms of concrete projects?
Now, as I have, I think, mentioned before, and it's very well, I think, underlined in the strategy, the link between the two, and it is not by accident. On the contrary, I should say, based on a lot of good cooperation inside the Commission between the various DGs, of course, DG NL, but also with DG GROW and CLIMA and RTD and MOVE, that we came with the alliance at the same time, launching it at the same time with the hydrogen strategy. The alliance was in principle announced during the launch of the industrial strategy, but materialized now, and it is considered an important vehicle actually to bring all the stakeholders together, but in particular the industrial ones, able to launch the projects at the scale necessary to make this transition and to tap into the potential that hydrogen can represent for the energy transition. So the important project of common European interest would be maybe the most important component to be now developed by the Alliance. And our colleagues from DG GROW are, of course, on lead for that. And with us, try to make sure that the energy policy dimension and energy plans with the industrial plans are very well articulated together and support this large-scale investments. We say that to achieve the objectives for actually 2030 and so, We need a lot of investments. For example, in renewable hydrogen, we speak about 20 to 40, 43 billion euros, while at the same time, we'll need to invest more than 200 to 300 billion euros on renewable hydrogen production. At the same time, we need to invest heavily in transport and distribution of hydrogen, plus in the end-use sector, being transport, being steel. And the alliance will represent actually the vehicle which will enable and support and steer in practice these investments.
Yeah, good. So there is a major innovation fund which has been launched recently with the ETS products revenue, and there was a call for expression of interest of 1 billion euro launched 2 weeks ago with a deadline of end of October. So we may see there a test for the industry commitments to come with viable projects in this innovation fund. And of course, also the agreement made last week by the European Council on the budget and on the recovery plan may be important, of course, to be able to support projects which are going in the direction of the strategy. Are you optimistic there about the commitment of the industry and of the project promoters to come with the right projects to be supported by all this money which is now made available?
Yeah, of course. Let's put all this into the right perspective. It's clear that this money is not sufficient for the whole transformation we need, and we know that. But now we have even more funding available, which to be made operational in the coming period into the context of the recovery package, as you are well aware. So, speaking about innovation fund, of course, we expect to have good proposals, and as you know, there are different types of projects which can be financed here. But we have to look more into the future, and I mentioned before some range of figures of how much we'll need actually to invest, and we speak about hundreds of billions of euros till 2050. It's clear this cannot be just public money, but you'll be now stimulated, and you'll have to create the framework in which to attract investments. We have to make this happen, and I have to say that we expect to see the interest growing from the various industries, including from the gas industry. We have seen over the last couple of years a growing interest into the direction also of hydrogen, of adapting the infrastructure to hydrogen. And this is for us extremely important, as it is for the industry, for its long-term survival and further development, because we have this clear objectives of carbon neutrality by 2050, and therefore it's important to transform. Renewable hydrogen is still more expensive today, but we have indications that renewable hydrogen may be competitive with the current even price of hydrogen by 2030. So it's important, if we speak about other forms of low carbon hydrogen, to start and to invest to be also active into this market, and bearing in mind that by 2050, when we speak about gas, and we acknowledge that half of our energy consumption being in the form of molecules, being gas or being liquid fuels, but these gases and liquid fuels will have to be decarbonized, and hydrogen will definitely be a very important part of it.
Yeah, thank you. So I see you are rather optimistic, but it's clear that there is a huge challenge ahead, and partly the commitment of the industry to come with projects and to invest in this future energy carrier will be important. It would be also interesting, I think Joseph Murphy has some questions on this. It's about the international position of hydrogen, and because hydrogen is seen today more as a local production and local use, because transport of hydrogen costs a lot of money. But I see in the papers a lot of ambitions to have international trading of hydrogen from Australia, from Russia, or from whatever. So this is, of course, another dimension which is important. So I don't know, Joseph Murphy, who is located in Moscow and is following the evolution in Russia, may have some thoughts about that and some questions about that.
Thank you. Yes, so a lot of countries, not just in Europe, are looking a lot more seriously at hydrogen development than ever before. I'm just interested in what your take on which countries look set to become pioneers outside of Europe in hydrogen energy. You know, which are making the most progress. And as we were talking about, some of these countries are aspiring to export hydrogen, and I'm wondering how that would affect Europe. To what extent does Europe anticipate becoming an importer of hydrogen or developing more of a fuel itself, and what countries might be key trading partners in this? So I was recently reading about Russia's energy ministry is drawing up a plan to develop hydrogen and export it, kind of maneuvering on the one hand its gas production status, but also its significant nuclear capacity to develop potentially lower carbon hydrogens. So what are your thoughts on these topics?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for pointing out to these developments. Also, it's important part of our strategy as well. And referring to the strategy, we underline at least two major dimensions. One is the relation with the neighboring countries, being Eastern Partnership or being southern countries in Mediterranean, Northern African, to tap into the potential, in particular for renewable hydrogen, which they have. At the same time, we look at what is happening internationally. And you said the countries, traditionally, the international collaboration on hydrogen so far was mainly started through the International Partnership on Hydrogen Economy, which was designed and focused on research. But gradually, and as I said, with the cost of technologies coming down and with the upscaling production and the opportunities and the interest, in particular in a system where we need hydrogen for decarbonizing an effective solution, different carbon-intensive industries and ways of transport, we need to address a number of other issues internationally as well, including the trade, including the certification, including the guarantees of origin, and we work on these issues. We work on these issues in the context of the Clean Energy Ministerial. We try to develop large-scale demonstration projects in the context of the mission innovation, and these are two relevant initiatives in which Commission is co-leading. So I have to say that these are very much on the radar, and we concentrate on them. We look also at other developments, on research, the cooperation, the most active countries and regions were, of course, Europe, US, Japan. But now there are more and more who become very active and who develop strategies. And if you look at the Australian strategy, it's very much based on renewable hydrogen, which is developing so a complete change from the past. And they were a big supplier of hydrogen. They will continue to be for the Japanese market. Now, there are others who are developing other relevant technologies in transport. And so the point we know that the whole world is moving, and we try to tap the potential, first of all, which we have in Europe, and to make best use. But we know that this may not be sufficient. So we need to look in this context at the southern neighborhood. We need to look at the energy community. We have to look also in the context of the Africa-Europe Green Energy Initiative, and to develop all the opportunities internationally for ensuring that if we need, we can also rely on a global market for clean, renewable, low carbon hydrogen.
Thank you. Very interesting. Jean-Arnold, do you have anything to add on the international hydrogen element?
Well, no, I think that I've seen a number of ambitions which were existing before, which are coming back, some like Desertec projects, which was to have renewable electricity coming from Sahara and things like that. And now the Germans particularly are pushing for the production of hydrogen indeed in Northern Africa, and then to import this hydrogen in Europe. So you see there are plenty of projects which are blossoming and which will require, of course, not only money but also a lot of diplomacy. Because when we are talking about energy, diplomacy is never very far away. So clearly there will be the need for developing more international cooperation on this. And I think that it's still a long way to go, but it's an interesting work to be undertaken and to see whether indeed electrification may go together with molecules in the future, and that is the issue. So that would be the end for me at this stage, and I'm very curious to see the projects, the concrete projects to come out of this strategy, because at the end, that is the only thing which counts, is to see project promoters and to see people who are believing in this and who are putting money in this. And it's not only the public money, but it's also the private money, and this is quite key.
Yeah, I think you have a very good point, and indeed it's important to attract investors. We try to create a level playing field. We try to create a favorable market environment for upscaling these projects, to mobilize public funding, but of course cannot be only public funding. So we need to have the regulatory framework and the market arrangements which will attract all these private investments and create the business case. And I think this is the main point, that we will have to succeed to create a business case for hydrogen. And this may not be so simple in the future energy system as it was in the past. The energy system become much more complex with much more solutions, with much more interlinkages. But we can succeed in this. And through this approach we had on energy system integration, combined with the use of IT technologies and digitalization, we'll have a lot of new solutions which we can put in practice, and in which hydrogen will play its major potential role in the long-term decarbonization of our economies, and making it happen according to the plans and to our objectives.
Yes, it seems like a very, very exciting time. It seems like every day we're reporting something new about some new project being announced, or some new investment, some sort of technical partnership on developing hydrogen. Would either of you like to add anything else before we bring this discussion to a conclusion?
Well, if I may say that it's a bold approach, I think, from not only the European Commission, but also from many countries we have seen in the recent months, coming with hydrogen strategy. So it's a belief in new technologies and new solutions for the decarbonization of the energy system. The good news is that everybody is working at decarbonization of the energy system. And of course, the bad news is that it needs a lot of commitments and a lot of money. to be implemented. I think that that is where we need to see champions for this strategy to materialize really. And I think that is the challenge. And of course, it's a public-private partnership because as Tudor said, you need, of course, to look at the regulatory framework, which has to be an incentive for these new technologies. And you need also to make public money to support this. But at the end, you need really companies who are investing in this because they believe in this future. So that's the challenge. So, and I find that particularly fascinating. And we will see what is happening. And the test will come very soon. So as I said, with the Innovation Fund, there are already a lot of opportunities for projects to come in, and we'll see whether it is coming.
Yeah, indeed, I would very much agree with you, Jean, and I would only maybe add here that all these funds which we are speaking about, these are not costs, these are actually investments, and are investments into modernizing our economies, into, of course, reaching carbon neutrality by 2050, but in also making sure that we are able to recreate and to strengthen the whole economic growth in Europe and also globally, to make sure that this transition at the end of the day is also very much for people creating jobs, creating growth, creating more than developed economies, which to work hand in hand with a cleaner planet.
Thank you. So thanks to both of you for being with us today. Really stimulating discussion that I hope our listeners will enjoy. So this has been the 5th episode of In a Nutshell, a webinar by Natural Gas World, where we analyse the key trends underway in the global gas industry. With me, your host, Joseph Murphy. Thank you for checking in, and see you in the next episode.